She was the woman the Gestapo feared more than any other. They called her the White Mouse because every time they got close, she slipped through their fingers. She moved across borders like smoke and gathered intelligence with the charm of a movie star and killed with the precision of a soldier. The Nazis put a 5 million franc bounty on her head, dead or alive. Her name was Nancy Wake, a glamorous Australian socialite turned unstoppable resistance leader. She became one of the most decorated women of World War II. She was fearless, cunning, and absolutely relentless. If a mission needed to be done, Nancy Wake would do it, even if it meant parachuting behind enemy lines, blowing up German trains, leading thousands of fighters, or bicycling more than 500 kilometers through Nazi territory to save an entire resistance network. But before she became a legend, she was simply a young woman searching for purpose, unaware that she would one day become the nightmare of the German occupation. This is the extraordinary story of Nancy Wake, the spy who outsmarted the Gestapo, the white mouse who refused to be caught, and the woman whose courage changed the fate of entire cities. Nancy Wake was born in Wellington, New Zealand in 1912 and raised in Australia. She grew up tough, rebellious, and fiercely independent, the kind of child who climbed trees, argued with adults, and refused to be told what to do. At the age of 16, she ran away from home and worked as a nurse. By 20, she had saved up enough money to travel, and she moved to London, where she reinvented herself as a journalist. Her beauty, wit, and intuition made her a natural reporter. In the early 1930s, she was sent on assignment to Paris, and everything in her life changed. Paris was alive with politics, culture, and chaos. Hitler was rising to power, war was creeping across Europe, and fascism was spreading like a shadow. Nancy, however, saw the danger earlier than most. While reporting in Vienna in 1933, she witnessed Nazi soldiers beating Jewish men and women in the streets. The brutality shocked her. In her own words, she said, "I saw what was coming, and I hated it, so I decided I would fight it." Back in Paris, she married a wealthy French industrialist, Henri Fiocca, in 1939. She might have lived a comfortable, privileged life, but war had other plans, and so did she. When the Germans invaded France, Nancy Wake did not flee. She stayed and began helping people escape the tightening grip of the Nazi occupation. As France fell, Nancy Wake transformed from a journalist into one of the key members of the French resistance. Her natural charm and fluency in French made her an ideal courier and guide. She forged documents, smuggled messages, and escorted Allied soldiers and Jews across borders. Her house in Marseille became a safe haven for escapees. Her husband supported her work, fully aware of the risk. Soon Nancy became part of a vast escape network that moved people from France into Spain and beyond. She hiked across snowy mountains, bribed guards, and talked her way through checkpoints with nothing but confidence and a dazzling smile. She was so good at slipping past German patrols that the Gestapo gave her a name, La Souris Blanche, the White Mouse. She became their obsession. Roadblocks were increased. Interrogations intensified. Posters with vague descriptions of a mysterious woman began to appear, but they never caught her. Nancy was fearless. She once slapped a German officer across the face at a checkpoint just to maintain her cover, and it worked. She walked right past him, but the Gestapo was closing in, By 1943, her network was compromised. The Germans had infiltrated part of the Marseille resistance, and Nancy's name appeared on their wanted lists. If they caught her, she would face torture and execution. Her escape from France would become the stuff of legend. It involved disguises, train rides under surveillance, a chase through Vichy-controlled territory, and climbing the Pyrenees on foot. Exhausted, starving, and hunted. But she made it out, eventually reaching Britain. There, she joined the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, Britain's covert organization for sabotage, espionage, and guerrilla warfare. And they sent her straight back into occupied France. This time, not as a courier, but as a fighter. By the time Nancy Wake arrived in Britain, she was no longer just a courier or a resistance helper. She was a woman forged by the brutality of occupation, by the terror of the Gestapo, by the pain of leaving her husband behind in Marseille. The Special Operations Executive, the SOE, immediately saw something in her that others often missed. A fire, a natural ability to lead, a ruthlessness that war sometimes demands. She began training in the Scottish Highlands and, for the first time, she learned the art of war in a formal way. The instructors were brutal and unforgiving, but Nancy thrived. She learned how to use explosives, how to kill silently, how to survive in the wilderness, how to parachute from planes, how to fight hand-to-hand, and how to endure interrogations. During weapons training, she became a natural marksman. During physical tests, she outran men. During mock interrogations, instructors said she was one of the most difficult operatives to break. She also learned something that shocked her fellow trainees. She could kill a man with her bare hands if she needed to. One instructor recalled, "Nancy is the bravest and toughest woman I have ever met. She fears nothing." And perhaps most importantly, she learned to transform her elegance, charm, and feminine confidence into tools of psychological warfare. By late 1943, she was no longer Nancy Wake, the journalist from Australia. She had become a weapon. SOE selected her for one of the most dangerous assignments of the war, a parachute drop into central France to unite fragmented resistance groups and prepare them for D-Day. Her mission would take her deep into enemy territory, back into the land she had barely escaped. On a moonlit night in April 1944, a transport plane roared over central France inside. Nancy Wake stood at the open door, wind blasting against her face. Below her stretched a land crawling with German troops. She took a breath. The green light flashed, and she jumped. Her parachute deployed, violently. So violently, in fact, that when she hit the ground, a French resistance fighter joked, "I hope all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruit this year." Nancy laughed. Then she stood up, brushed herself off, and got straight to work. She had dropped into the Auvergne region, where she met the Maquis, the fierce French resistance fighters who lived in forests, caves, and mountains. They were underfed, poorly armed, and constantly hunted by German patrols. And yet, SOE wanted Nancy to whip them into shape, organize sabotage operations, and help unify thousands of fighters in preparation for D-Day. Her presence shocked the Maquis. A woman, a foreigner, dropping out of the sky in the middle of the night. But within days they respected her, even feared her. A little Nancy Wake had an iron will. She could drink any man under the table. She trained them in explosives, discipline, and guerrilla tactics. She planned ambushes. She argued with their commanders until they accepted her plans. She was tireless. One resistance leader said, "Nancy didn't know the meaning of fear. Her camp became one of the most effective resistance cells in France." Under Nancy's guidance, the Maquis blew up bridges, derailed trains, cut phone lines, ambushed German convoys, and disrupted supply chains. They hit so many targets that German command believed they were fighting an entire Allied battalion. But their success brought danger. The Germans began tightening their noose around the region. Radio equipment was sabotaged. Supply drops were delayed, and the Maquis soon found themselves too isolated. Then came the disaster that nearly ended it all. Their radio operator was killed, and with him, their only way to request supplies, coordinate missions, or call for extraction. If they couldn't restore contact, the entire resistance network, thousands of fighters, would collapse, and the fate of that network would soon rest on Nancy Wake alone. The Maquis were pinned down. Supplies were running low. A major German sweep was underway. Without a radio, they were blind. No messages could reach London. No weapons, ammunition, or explosives could be delivered. No missions could be coordinated. If they didn't re-establish communication soon, everything they had built was going to collapse. Nancy Wake didn't hesitate. She strapped a small amount of food to her bicycle, carried coded messages in her clothing, and set off alone through enemy territory to find a working radio operator from another resistance cell. And so began one of the greatest physical feats of resistance in the entire war. A 500-kilometer ride through Nazi-occupied France. No sleep, little food, roadblocks everywhere. Nancy pedaled through villages crawling with German troops. She hid in barns, ditches, and abandoned sheds, but she refused to stop. She rode day and night, fueled by adrenaline and a single thought: I will not let my men fall. She crossed mountains, rivers, forests, and border zones. When she arrived at the first radio operator's location, she learned he had been captured. She didn't break. She didn't panic. She simply got back on the bicycle and rode to the next cell. When she finally found a working operator, she sent the message to London and collapsed from exhaustion. Witnesses said she slept for nearly 24 hours without waking. Thanks to her ride, supply drops resumed. The Maquis regained their strength, thousands of lives, and the entire regional resistance were saved. This one woman, alone on a bicycle, had outrun the Gestapo and outmaneuvered the German army. With supply lines restored, Nancy returned to the Maquis. But by now the Germans were furious. They sent in armored units, SS divisions, and elite tracking teams. Entire forests were burned in an attempt to smoke out resistance fighters. The Maquis had no choice but to fight. In the battles that followed, Nancy Wake proved she was not just a courier, not just a leader, but a warrior. She led ambushes, set demolition charges, planned hit-and-run attacks, and fought alongside her men in direct combat. One of the most dramatic stories comes from a German checkpoint. A sentry heard movement and approached the Maquis fighters. If he raised the alarm, hundreds would die. Nancy didn't hesitate. She grabbed him from behind and killed him with her bare hands. Later she explained, "He was about to raise the alarm. There was no choice." Her soldiers were stunned. They had never seen a woman kill a German soldier with such cold precision. But Nancy Wake was beyond fear now. She understood war in a way that many never do. She understood that hesitation meant death, for her and for her men. As D-Day approached, Nancy's Maquis group carried out massive sabotage operations. They blew up railway lines, destroyed bridges, cut telephone networks, and attacked German convoys. Every explosion delayed reinforcements heading toward Normandy. Every derailment slowed the German response. Every ambush reduced the number of German troops that could reach the front, historians later agreed. The Maquis in Nancy Wake's region caused some of the most effective resistance disruptions anywhere in France, but their victories came with heavy losses. Many fighters were captured, tortured, and executed. The forests they lived in became graveyards. Through it all, Nancy Wake remained unbroken. She drank with her men the night before missions. She comforted the wounded. She never cried, not once, until after the war. Her legend grew, and so did the bounty on her head. The Gestapo now wanted her dead more than any other resistance fighter in France. But she was not done with them yet. As the Allied invasion intensified across France, Nancy Wake's Maquis group launched some of their boldest operations yet. The Germans were stretched thin, panicked, and increasingly brutal, but Nancy and her fighters had tasted momentum, and they refused to stop. Their biggest raid came in June 1944, when they attacked a German convoy traveling through a narrow forest route. With carefully placed explosives and snipers concealed in the trees, Nancy coordinated one of the most devastating ambushes in the region. Trucks exploded. German soldiers scattered. The Maquis attacked with fury. Nancy moved through the chaos with fearless precision. She carried ammunition between fighters, shouted orders, and kept the men focused during the most intense moments of the battle. She was always where she was most needed, even when it meant running into gunfire. By the end of the fight, dozens of German troops lay dead, and the Maquis had seized weapons, maps, and vehicles. The victory boosted morale across the region. Word spread, the White Mouse is still alive. The White Mouse is winning. But victory came with heartbreak. In late 1944, Nancy learned the truth she had feared. Her husband, Henri Fiocca, had been captured by the Gestapo months earlier. They tortured him for information he never gave them. He died protecting her. It shattered Nancy. This woman who had faced machine guns, grenades, torture chambers, and Nazi raids without a tear, finally broke down. Years later, she said, "I would have killed myself if I had known, but I didn't know. So I fought." And she continued fighting. With even more determination, Nancy remained with the Maquis until Allied forces reached their region. She led her fighters into liberated towns, helped restore order, and assisted Allied commanders. When the war finally ended, Nancy Wake didn't celebrate. She didn't go to victory parades. She didn't give speeches. She walked away quietly, carrying the weight of everything she had witnessed, everything she had done, and everything she had lost. When the guns fell silent, Nancy Wake was recognized as one of the most decorated women of World War II. She received honors from France, Britain, the United States, and New Zealand. But for decades, Australia, her home country, failed to acknowledge her bravery. Only later in life did they begin to honor her properly. After the war, she attempted to build a normal life. She remarried, she traveled, she lived quietly. But Nancy Wake was not a woman built for ordinary days. She confessed that peace bored her. She missed the danger. She missed the adrenaline. She missed being part of something epic. In interviews, she often laughed and said, "I was good at killing Nazis." That was my job, and I don't regret it. She lived to the age of 98, sharp, witty, unfiltered until her last breath. Nancy Wake never thought of herself as a hero. She believed she simply did what had to be done. No more, no less. But history remembers her differently. She was a force of nature, a storm in human form, a woman who made the Nazi regime tremble, a legend who biked hundreds of kilometers, fought in the forests, led armies, and defied the most feared secret police in Europe, the White Mouse, the spy who outsmarted the Gestapo, the woman the Nazis could never catch. Her story is a reminder that courage comes in many forms. And sometimes the bravest warrior in the war isn't a man with a rifle, but a woman with fire in her heart and an iron will that nothing on earth can break.